Wow, we have 3 blank tables. Who's going to come sit here at these tables? Anybody? Or else maybe we could move up. Well, no, I won't make you. It's okay. Everybody looks so comfortable. If we can take our places, we'll begin with prayer. I guess we're missing a few people tonight. How's everybody doing? Still good? Still high? Still up on the mountaintop, I hope? Hope. You can be here. It's okay. You don't all have to crowd at one table. You can be here. I kind of wanted you closer together if we could. That'd be great. Yay, thank you. You guys still want to be far away? All right. Whatever. All right, so let us begin with a little prayer, and we're going to have a regular class tonight. We haven't done that in a while now, a few weeks. There were all the excitement of sacraments and rites and everything else we've done. But as soon as everyone's settled, we're going to pray. As soon as everybody's at their seat, Gabby, you want to come for the opening prayer? Then you can have food, I promise. Thank you. So let us begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let's just take a moment after this long, probably busy day, just to take a few breaths and focus inward, bring ourselves intentionally into God's presence. Loving God, we thank you for bringing us together on this beautiful spring evening after Easter. As our hearts are still full and happy and joyful from all of the many blessings that you've given us and continue to shower upon us, help us to continue to be curious about you, about your church, and all of the things that lie ahead of us now as neophytes and team. And tonight, as we talk about right and wrong and what you've placed on our hearts about living meaningful and good lives, just help us to continue to separate the truth from our feelings, the truth from old patterns of thinking, and most of all, just continue to help us to incorporate your great mercy and grace into our lives. And tonight we lift up and pray for all of the neophytes all over the world, as well as those who are still waiting and inquiring, waiting for the sacraments. And we trust that in time, in your time, all will come together for the good. And we make this and all our prayers in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Anything exciting anyone wants to share before we begin? I think Christy has something exciting to share. I want you to show them, bring it up here. Okay, she was showing me this. Come look. Look what's happened to Christy's retreat cross. Isn't that awesome?
Well, it took a whole week before I even put it in water after the retreat, so they can still grow if you have them at home. But it's growing roots, and I had my prayer beads around it, and it really kind of reminds me that we are all the branches, and these people that I'm praying for are these specific branches. So I just love it because it looks so pretty.
Isn't that pretty?
Right next to Donna's candle
Oh.
that she gave us, and we light it every day. So
Thank you, Christy. I just thought that was so neat. Yay! Yeah. I was telling Christy that I actually have 2 pretty big grapevines in my backyard. Started that little tiny twig, and then they started growing more and more, and got so many long. I stuck them in a pot, 2 different ones, and now they're creeping and you know. So, and there's others. I think, Elizabeth, you have some that are growing, don't you? Hers has got grapes on it too. So you can grow them from these little these little twigs. Just really fun. Anybody else have anything they want to share or whatever? I know last week we talked, but go ahead. Yay! Woo! I was going to ask you tonight, Tricia, but I was afraid. Like, when's he coming home? Oh, that's so exciting. Oh, great. Yeah. Oh, nice. Oh, that's going to be great. Anybody else have anything they want to share exciting? All right, well, down to business then, you guys. Okay, here we go. Tonight we're going to be talking about Christian morality. Normally we would have had this class before the Easter Vigil, but because we got bumped out of the church, out of our space one night, and because lots of things happened, that was the class I took out and thought, okay, well, let's just do this during Mystagogia. So remember that now we are entering into part 4 of our CIA. Remember at the very beginning I told you there's 4 parts. There was inquiry, there was the catechumenate, there was the period of enlightenment that was very quick, happened right after the rite of election and into Holy Week. And now we're into a period called Mystagogia. And basically what it means is that we are going to spend the next 5 weeks or so really delving deeper into the mysteries of the faith. So it's still a time to ask questions and to wonder. And this particular topic can be sort of problematic in some ways, but also will give you a lot to ponder the rest of your life, actually. Some of the issues that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to start out by giving you a little morality lesson. If you took any kind of philosophy in college, it'll just be a review. But I'm going to add another layer about Christian morality on top of it. And then we'll take a break, and then we'll do some table talk and question and answer. And we have some moral dilemmas for you to kind of grapple with, which is always the hot topic of the night, okay? So here we go. So first of all, this is a really important issue, morality, to talk about, even though it's not easy sometimes to talk about it. But basically, it's really important because of the way our culture is now. Because of the internet and because of what we call pluralism, meaning we all have a million viewpoints on a million different issues, and they're at your fingertips. Sometimes it can be really overwhelming and confusing as to what is right and what is wrong, because all of these opinions are flying at you every single day, depending on what news you watch, what newspaper you read, or online papers that you hear, or even people talking at work politically, and so on and so forth. So sometimes it's really difficult to discern what is really right and wrong, and what does the church teach, and how are we supposed to incorporate these ideas. Some of us have held some pretty strong opinions throughout our lives that now we might find that we're a little bit at odds with because of what the church teaches. So it's a really important thing to look at, what actually we believe and how we might start thinking in a different way morally. So again, as I mentioned here, there's a lot of new paradigms, and that raises a lot of new questions. There seems to be a lot of confusion. That's what I think when I listen to people talking about issues. And basically people, kind of go by what they feel, their gut reaction to something, rather than maybe what the church teaches, and they're ignorant of what the church teaches. And when you tell them that, they're like, no, the church doesn't teach that. Well, yes, it does. So So anyway, there's many challenges in this rapidly changing society, and this causes a lot of conflict sometimes within ourselves about, how we are to believe. Some of us are just sort of immature in our thinking in terms of religion and how do we apply that. So let's start with what is morality? And you can look up a definition in the dictionary if you want. But my question, is it simply a set of rules and regulations to be obeyed or else? And that is sort of the paradigm that we grow up with as children. And children need those really black and white guidelines to grow up by. You can't just say, well, whatever, to a child. So you give them some strict moral guidelines. But as we get older, all of us know life gets a lot more complicated. And so is it just a set of rules and regulations to be obeyed or else? And I say no. There's so much more to it. And so we're going to put some layers on that now. There's a lot of different models of morality, if you will. Call them models. And we're going to explore all of these. So here they are. There's the legal model. There's the love model. There's the discipleship model. And there's the inner conviction, moral conscience model. So let's look at each one of these, and maybe it'll kind of clear our thinking. Okay, in the legal model, it actually imitates what we know as our legal system or our law. So God in the legal model is a judge and lawgiver. So this is the oldest model that we have. It's very ingrained in us. This is the model that comes from the Old Testament, I guess you could say, issue, but really it comes even older than the Old Testament, because it's all about the society's need somehow to organize itself, to maintain peace and harmony. And you can go back, as far back into civilization, and one of the first things they did was to set a moral code for people. Because otherwise, everyone just went around killing each other or doing horrible things to each other that people instinctively knew, because God put that in their soul, was wrong. So there became this way of organizing the culture, so that there were consequences for breaking the law. So if you broke the law, then you were going to pay the price idea. So, and that's just so old. I mean, all of us probably grew up with that, but from the time we were really little, if you don't keep the rule, this is what's going to happen. You're going to be grounded. You're not going to be able to go with your friends. You can't have the lollipop. Whatever it is, way back, this is very ingrained in us. And so this is pretty much how we continue to think. Many people do. So because of that, we've projected onto God the same kind of law giver and judge as we do in our own legal system. So extreme disobedience then, what happens? We think we'll be expelled from the church. We think God won't love us anymore. And somehow or other, we have this idea that if we disobey the rules, then what's the consequence? What is it? Everybody knows. We're going to go to, that place. Okay. So this is the legal model. Here are some limitations of the legal model. If this is the only model that we have for morality, here's the limitations. We can become what's called scrupulous or scrupulosity. It's a preoccupation and fear out of not perfectly following the law. So these are people that think that if they don't follow it exactly, that God is going to cut them off and not love them anymore, send them to hell. And so people become very scrupulous about their behavior. And this can have absolutely nothing to do with a spiritual life at all. They can become preoccupied with it. There's also what's called circumvention. So we can say, well, okay, there's a law now. How much can I get away with? before committing a sin. You know, and this is something, some of you are laughing, but you know, we all kind of grew up with this too. It's like, okay, can I go this far? Is this a sin? Or is that, and that happens a lot in confession. If you talk to priests, they always say that people come in and say, well, I did this. Well, how far did you go? And, you know, is it a sin this time or not? And that's sort of that idea of the laundry list idea. It's kind of like, okay, I can do this much and I'm okay. All right. So, still a good person. So circumvention, meaning, you know, and don't we all do this with the law of the land? If no one's around, should I stop at the stop sign? You know, or can I get away with just sort of creeping through it? You know, would I obey that law? You know, how far can I go without breaking the law? I mean, we just are having tax time, okay? So how far can I get away with it? All right, so this is the legal model. The next one is rigid imposition of the law. And when that happens, what happens as a result? Rebellious questioning of authority. The law is seen as oppressive and burdensome. Okay, what does this sound like? Your adolescent teenager telling you, your law is too strict. You know, who are you to tell me? You are not the authority. And believe it or not, people look at the Pope or the priest or the bishop or anybody and say that same thing. So if we impose the law too rigidly, we're definitely going to rebel on it. And the final one is relativism. And that is the opposite of scrupulosity, where we're saying, I should be able to determine what's right or wrong for me. Okay? That's the law, but I don't believe that because I want to do what I want to do. And so I'm going to make up my own rules. And that's all I need. Okay? So here's what happens if we impose too much of a legal model onto any kind of morality. These are the things that people try to wiggle around with. Okay, so that's the legal model. Let's look at another one. Oh, before we go to that, the need for the law. Okay, so I'm not saying we don't need the law. Okay, we do. But a truly mature adult sees the need for the law, and society will always be agreed upon norms and values that uphold the common good. We still need the law, right? We can't just get rid of it. So the norms must and do drive our values, these things that we believe in. So we're not saying that we're saying it may not be central to our personal morality, but we also, on the other hand, need it. Sort of paradoxical, right? All right, so let's look at another model, the love model. This model is based on the 2 great commandments that Jesus gave us, and on the Beatitudes, and on the Sermon on the Mount. Remember the 2 great commandments. What were they? Anybody? Love God with your whole heart, whole mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, the 2 great commandments. Remember Jesus, when they asked him, what's the greatest commandment from the law of Moses? He was trying to trip him up, and which one of these is, you know. And he said, these are the greatest commandments. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So what could they say? Because in those 2 great commandments, all of the law of Moses was contained in those. All right, so he also talked in the Beatitudes from the Sermon on the Mount how these all things play out. Remember, we talked about those before. So this kind of love he's really talking about isn't about a feeling. It's just about a code of conduct where the other person is more important than what I want or what I feel. So the love that Jesus taught us by word and example drives the moral response in all situations. It's kind of like those little bracelets that the kids always used to wear, you know, WWJD. What would Jesus do? So you're always thinking, okay, what would he do in this situation? What's the loving thing to do? I always think that's pretty good, right? It is a pretty good way to think about it. What is the loving thing to do? All right, now, that works, but there are some limitations, as I say. The uncertainty of what the most loving thing would do. You know, I mean, I just been in situations where I prayed and prayed and prayed about something and said, you know, Jesus, just tell me, what do you want me to do? I'll do it, but I can't figure out what it is you want me to do. Especially when you're trying to choose between two things that are good. You know, which one is morally better than the other? They're both good, but which one do I do? And that's where you get a little tripped up because you're not really sure. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And especially if you're immature, think about it, you know. And you really don't know what love is. And you're saying, I'm going to do the loving thing, and this is what it's going to be. And you think it is loving for you, but you know, you're young and you really don't know. So the uncertainty isn't good. So we run the risk of putting our own morality on the shoulders of Jesus to give divine acceptance of our own narrow view. Follow me? So we're saying, okay, I feel like this is loving, so this must be what Jesus wants, but it may be a very narrow view and not what really is moral. So the model fails in determining the right thing to do in many circumstances. You know, we just really don't know. Love is such a nebulous thing and changes, your understanding of it continues to change throughout your life, your lifetime, right? So lots and lots of movies have been made about this, right? People thinking they were doing the loving thing and actually were committing great immoral acts because of it. All right, so there's limitations there. Let's look at the discipleship model. The discipleship model. Now this one, there's been a lot of books, and especially recently, written about discipleship and what that really means. And here I've said it's based on an intimate reciprocal relationship with Jesus. So if I'm a true disciple, I am putting every single day intentionally trying to live my life according to what Jesus wants a disciple to live. But I must be in a relationship with him to do this, okay? So Jesus commissioned his followers to follow his example of the New Testament and to join with other Christians in the community. Remember in the Acts of the Apostles, which we've been reading a lot of now that Easter is here, you read a lot about what they were doing. Remember, it said just in the Gospel on Sunday that they would pool all their resources, they sell everything, their houses, they put all the money together, and they all lived in a big commune. Free love. No, it always sounded like this, you know, really, really wonderful community that they had, and everybody lived in harmony, and nobody was in need. So they took care of all the poor people, and they took care of all the widows and the orphans, and everybody lived together. And so, you know, there used to be this song called "They Will Know We Are Christians by Our Love, and they'll know we are." Remember that? Christians by our love. Okay, that all came from the Acts of the Apostles. Because the disciples, that's how they knew they were Christians. Because of the way they lived their lives. Now remember that as the church grew, and the house churches became public, and as soon as you start adding more people, you get more problems, right? You know, and more, you know, selfishness and so on and so forth. So even though you might say you're a disciple, you may not be. So, however, the discipleship model of the New Testament was a welcome change to the legal model. Think about the legal model in the Old Testament and what Jesus was railing about in the New Testament in regard to the Pharisees. Remember the Pharisees? The Pharisees were all these really learned men, and I would say probably their wives too, women. We just know about the guys because they were public. But they knew the law. They knew it strictly. That's why they were always trying to trip Jesus up with what he was doing. Like if he would heal on the Sabbath, that was against the law. And he did. He kept breaking the law and breaking it and breaking it. So they were legalists. They followed the letter of the law. But he was always telling them, you have no love in your hearts. You don't love God. You only love the law. He called them whitened sepulchres. They were white on the outside, and they were dark and corrupted on the inside. That was a pretty bad insult for these guys. No wonder they crucified him over it. Okay? So for the Christians following Jesus in the early model, this model was so liberating for them. You know, no longer did they have to go to Deuteronomy and look at every single law and every little letter of the law, and every hair had to be in place and everybody had to do a certain way, and that was exhausting. So now this was a welcome model, to be in a reciprocal love relationship with Christ. So much discernment happens in the context of community as it seeks to live out this gospel. And this particular model continues today. I was trying to, as I try to live out being a true disciple of Jesus, or an intentional disciple, it can be very, it can take a lot of time and prayer and discernment to be able to do that. This model also has some limitations because there's no clear directives given to address the complex situations that Christians face, especially today. When life was simpler and there weren't as many choices, it was a lot easier. But today, when we have a million different choices and they all seem to be opening doors that are good, that can be very, very confusing. There's no concrete answers to what is morally right and wrong anymore, because there's so much splitting of hairs on everything. Okay, and we're going to get to that in a minute. So more might be needed to add on to this. So let's go to this other model. This is called the inner conviction or moral conscience model. Okay, so in this model now comes another layer of importance in terms of morality, and that is the acceptance of personal responsibility for moral living. And you see here, joyful acceptance of personal responsibility. So in other words, in this particular model, I'm going to spend a lot of time looking into my heart, really praying about, really discerning what is right and what is wrong about every act. And when I mess up, when I sin, I accept the responsibility for that. I don't say, well, Stephen made me do it, or the devil made me do it, or I would have done different if it hadn't been for so-and-so or something that happened where we're shifting the blame. You're saying, no, I discerned it, and this is my responsibility now. So we look at the Ten Commandments. We see them as a response to the love, the care and nurturing that is shown us by God in sacred covenant relationships. So we don't throw out the Ten Commandments. Remember what Jesus said. They said, you keep breaking the law. And he kept telling them, I haven't come to abolish the law. I have come to fulfill the law. And that completely mesmerized and confused all of them. What did he really mean by that? Okay, so we accept the Ten Commandments. We look at them joyfully and put them in our lives. The directives of the law guide us, but we choose to make a personal or mature commitment to live by the law. The law doesn't impose on me a prison or rules to follow, but I choose. I want these laws in my life because they bring freedom. They help me discern. Okay, so advantages, more advantages of the inner conviction or moral conscience. The law isn't imposed. As I said, it's embraced. And it's embraced out of a love relationship with God, who is the covenant relationship with us. We don't follow the law out of fear or blind obedience, but in complete freedom of choice. You see the difference there? I hope you're following this, okay? You see the little difference here. It has to do with how we are viewing it and bringing it into our own lives. Let me talk to you a little bit about conscience, okay? Now, usually when people start talking about conscience, they start thinking about the little cartoon with the little angels on the shoulder. One's an angel, one's a devil, And these little voices inside of you telling you, do it, go ahead, do it. No. Or don't do that. No, don't do that. And so a lot of times we have been stuck in this kind of childlike understanding of conscience as this little inner voice that's telling us what's right or wrong. Okay, but conscience is a lot more than that. Okay? It's not just a tool that determines, the right or wrong of something, as I mentioned, but it should drive our whole life. Okay, so what the teaching is, and this goes back to St. Thomas Aquinas, and he said that when we were conceived in the womb, we were given a soul. We were made in the image and likeness of God. So within us, God has placed within us this ability to know right and wrong. It's innate. We're born with it. Okay, that doesn't mean a baby or a child has knowledge of it. The child has to grow in knowledge of it. But we have inside of ourselves the Christ, the Lord, the God within, the divine voice that is sacred. That's what differs. That's what makes us differ as Christians from other world religions. Okay, we believe this. This is what's called conscience. It's that innermost, your own innermost knowing, the deep down knowing of what is right and wrong. And we come to light. We come to understand that throughout our lives. So if we are nurtured as a child in a loving home with a lot of positive influences around us and examples, we grow and we spiral up into the light, and we grow into moral people who instinctively know the right and wrong of something. Okay? If we are born into a family or into a circumstance that spirals us down into darkness and evil, we still have that deep down conscience in us, but a lot of it is clouded by or taken away from us. Our freedom becomes diminished and we don't know what's right or wrong anymore. Hence we have criminal acts and really horrible things that people do to one another. It's not that God has abandoned them and they don't have that ability. It's just that they've been in circumstances where their freedom has been taken away so many times that they're not free to choose. Okay, so those of us that are in garden variety normal, families, we've all got some weird stuff in our lives, I know. But those of us that are in these normal situations must cultivate the conscience that's been given to us. This is what the church teaches. But the church bows to your conscience on any moral act. Always. Because we believe that God is in you. Okay? So, if we believe that, then as adults we continue to grow in that. Well, how do we do that? Well, we continue to learn what the church teaches. We continue to pray. We continue to live. We continue to be in relationship with one another so that we can figure what this really is about. So, conscience then achieves its highest level when we act not because of some obligation to follow, but because it's the right and moral thing to do. And eventually, we can trust this. I mean, I'm saying eventually, and I'm going to show you, I gave you a little piece of paper there that we'll look at, the levels of morality and how we determine this. That's why even as teenagers, they are not developed to a high level of morality yet. So they still need lots of guidelines and lots of teaching and direction. We don't just let them, okay, whatever you think, go ahead and do it, And we've seen the destruction that comes when people are given too much choice without any kind of conscience development. Okay, and then we see all of the good and wonderful things that happen when people are given that freedom and do know that. Then they begin to live lives that are different than they were before. Okay, so we develop a good conscience over time by creating the habit of good behavior. This is another kind of basic thing that Thomas Aquinas and some of the other great thinkers, moral teachers, say, that if you act morally, eventually you will think morally as well. Okay, so behavior and thoughts are very important. They go together. Sometimes we can have all kinds of thoughts that are maybe not in line with the church, but we're still acting morally. That's always a good sign, because it means that we're trying to bring those two things together. Let me give you a really simple example, okay, just to think about. Let's think about, and this isn't a moral issue. Well, maybe for some of you it is, but it really isn't a moral issue. But let's talk about, let's say that you started smoking when you were young. Okay, so when you're 18 or 16 years old, you might know that smoking isn't good for you, right? You know it's expensive, it's probably not good for you, and so on and so forth. But you want to be cool, so you start smoking. And eventually, it's a habit now, and you can't quit. You're an adult. Okay, now, there you have it, and you begin to have all this dissonance between what you know to be true and what your behavior is, right? So you must know a lot of people that smoke that really want to quit, and they know why they should quit. They know that it's bad for them, it's expensive, and all the other things that go with it, but they can't do it. Okay, well, that's a very simple idea, but think about that in terms of morality. There's a lot of people who know what the right thing to do is, but they compulsively do it anyway because they can't bring those two things together. Well, that's what a mature conscience is bringing behavior and belief together in your life, okay? It's not easy to do it. It's a huge challenge. The rest of your life, you're going to be struggling with this issue of bringing behavior and moral teaching together. Okay, that's the hardest part of it. Okay, so habitual truth-telling, just as a truthful person, the ability to discern truthfulness and lack of it in specific or lie situations, it can be true of either way. It can be true of the truth. It can be true of untruth as well. But we develop this good conscience over time by trying over and over again to bring our actions in complete balance with our thoughts and our beliefs. Okay, so Aristotle insisted that morality is judged by the judgment of a morally virtuous person, not by the code of law or ethics. Okay? See what he's saying here? Okay, we have the ethics and Thank you. My battery's been recharged. Oh, good. I wish it was that easy. Anyway, I'm getting all passionate about this. Okay, so I can't say this over and over again. This is good news, you guys, really good news. Because when we look at what the church teaches, which we're going to look at in a minute here, what the church teaches on a particular issue, the church will always set the bar as high as it can possibly go. And it'll seem very black and white, because that's the way law is. It's black and white. It seems very like this, thou shalt not, okay? But then you have to look at the nuances of that law in terms of your person, your inner conscience, the situation you're in, how much freedom you have in that decision to be moral or not. There's a lot of things as an adult that you have to start looking at. So it's not as simple as saying, well, the church teaches, that thou shalt not kill. Well, what does that mean? There's a lot of different, you know what I'm saying now, okay? Is it just about taking a gun and shooting someone, taking the unjustified taking of another person's life? No. That's an easy one. How about killing somebody's spirit? Killing somebody's good name? Now we start picking at the smaller parts of the law. It's not so simple anymore. So that's why having that inner conviction and constantly turning it over and over and over, like a garden inside of you, turning the soil over. Keep on looking at it. Keep on listening. Keeping on thinking and praying about it. That's how we eventually form our conscience, a really good conscience. So, as it says here, forming it has to do with getting in touch with the moral code that exists within us. It's a really important thing. We believe that people are basically good. Not all world religions believe that. We do as Christians. People are born basically good, with the imprint of God on their soul. And then that has ramifications for the rest of our lives. And it's really hard sometimes. I mean, when I look at things that happen, and all we hear about is all this bad stuff in the news. Right now they're, the trial of the Boston Marathon bomber, and all the things that you just look at and you're so disgusted with these people. And the things happening in the Middle East, with ISIS and, and we can't understand it. And why are they doing it? And our whole being just wants to say, obliterate them, just get rid of them, drop a bomb on them, just, because for us, we want to make it simple and black and white, but it's not like that with God. So the challenge of an adult life is to continue to grapple with all of those little gray areas in forming it. All right, so let's take a break, and then we'll come back and just talk a little tiny bit more about conscience, and then we'll do some table talk. Okay, let's take that. This handout that I gave you, and things to consider. And on one side, it's called Kohlberg's 6 Stages of Morality. If you might have studied Kohlberg when you were in college, everybody pretty much does. But anyway, if you look at these steps that he's saying here, is that this is how we grow.